I'm going to talk to you today about The Infinite Game. Now, if you haven't read this book by Simon Sinek, please put it on your list. I read this book for the first time back in 2020. I think I've read it at least a couple times again since then. And please pull that off your shelf. And I want to share with you some thoughts that I was having as I was reading this again this morning, because I'm in a different place. And because I'm in a different place, I'm seeing things just a little bit different. And today's conversation is going to be a little bit different than some of the other conversations that we've had. But please do me a favor and slow down and listen. I promise this is going to benefit you. All right. If there are at least two players, a game exists. And there are two types of games. There are finite games and there are infinite games. And the first question that I would ask you is, do you know which one you're in? Are you playing a finite game or are you playing an infinite game? And if you want to write the answer down now, that's cool. And your answer might change in the next 30 minutes. In finite games, there is always a beginning, a middle, and an end. Infinite games, in contrast, are played by players with a just cause. Please underline that, all right? I want you to put that in quotations, and I want you to underline it because just cause is very important, and we're going to come back to this. Infinite games, in contrast, are played by players with a just cause that is bigger than winning the game. There is no such thing as winning in an infinite game. In an infinite game, the primary objective is to keep playing, to perpetuate the game. The objective is to keep playing. The objective is to perpetuate the game. My primary objective, my just cause, is to change lives. Now, what's interesting is I want you to stop for a moment. I want you to think of games. And I want you to think of teams in the way that we normally do. And let's take the Giants and the Eagles, okay? So for all of you that are from the Northeast, you're like, cool, I either love the Giants, love the Eagles, hate the Giants, hate the Eagles, or maybe I hate them both because I like somebody else, and that's all good, okay? One of the interesting things about how this works is we associate with teams and we find ourselves connecting to those teams as if we're a part of that team. And in business, we really are. And one of the characteristics of doing that is we may like somebody or dislike them because of the team they play for. I'll give you a really good example. For most of his career, I did not like Tom Brady. Then Tom Brady joins the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and all of a sudden, I'm a Tom Brady fan. Now, this year it's in question. But technically, I'm still a Tom Brady fan. All right, now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at this the way I looked at this. Okay, now we're talking business and we're talking about my life. All right, I can be a part of this team or I could be a part of this team. And I could be part of neither team. And my just cause doesn't change. My just cause, and I'm going to share it with you later, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a peek into it right now, is to change lives. My just cause doesn't change because I go from one team to the other, or I don't play for either one. I still have this same just cause. Now, if I were playing a finite game, that wouldn't be true. But because I'm playing an infinite game, it is true. All right. My primary objective is to change lives. I can change teams or play for neither team, and my just cause remains the same. All right, I already shared that with you, but I wrote it down, so I have to share it again. No matter how successful we are in life, when we die, none of us will be declared the winner of life. Please write that down. If we listen to the language of so many of our leaders, It's as if they don't know the game in which they are playing. They talk consistently about winning. They obsess about beating the competition. They announce to the world that they are the best. They state that their vision is to be number one. Except in games without finish lines, all of these things are impossible. To be the best, to be number one, is impossible in a game without finish lines. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Well, I don't know. Your answer is your answer. My answer is it's a good thing. Am I playing a game without a finish line, or is there a finish line? Here's another question I have for you. What if there was? What would you do when you got there? Business is full of examples of companies that were playing to be number one, to finish the race in first place, and they're no longer there. It's easier for David to beat Goliath, almost always does, by the way, until David becomes Goliath. And then the game changed. Now, what's the secret to that? Well, it's off topic, bunny trail alert. If you're David who has become Goliath, your mindset has to remain David. You have to continue to work, to play the game as if you are David, because if you start thinking of yourself as Goliath, you're losing. Sometimes you're losing so slowly, it feels like you're winning, but you're losing. All right. To succeed in the infinite game of business, we have to stop thinking about who wins or who's the best and start thinking about how to build organizations that are strong enough and healthy enough to stay in the game for many generations to come. I'm going to give you a few examples, okay? RE/MAX, here's an example. How many of you remember No One Sells More Homes Than RE/MAX? That was mid-2000s, right? And it was true. They were number one in the real estate industry. Do you know that at one point, Century 21 was number one? And RE/MAX and Keller Williams and who's next? And there are many examples of these companies in the real estate business, but there's examples of companies outside the real estate business as well. Blockbuster. Blockbuster at one time owned market share. And when disruption came, and disruption came in the form of Netflix, this company that was going to provide this service to customers who wanted something that was not traditional, that wanted something different than going to the store, looking at the shelves, picking out a movie and taking it home. And Netflix was so smart in how they did this, they actually named their company Netflix, as in internet, when the internet had absolutely nothing to do with how they did business in the beginning. The way Netflix worked in the beginning is you picked out a movie that you wanted, you ordered it, you filled out all your personal information, which means they're gathering your information, they're building a database, and then they would mail the movie to your home. Do you remember that? Now, what's also interesting about this is Blockbuster owned the technology to go digital. Hold on. The CEO at the time actually implemented this, and they were prepared to go digital. And what happened? Well, profits went down. Profits went down by quite a bit. And the board of directors decided they didn't like this. Profits are going down. We're making less money. And they fired the CEO. And they shelved the idea. And Netflix actually came to Blockbuster at one point and asked them, hey, do you want to buy our company? They said, no, what would we want to do with your little bitty company? They fired the CEO who had created the technology to go digital, And within a couple of years, they were filing bankruptcy. They were playing a finite game. If they would have been playing an infinite game, they would have asked better questions. They wouldn't have asked, are we number one? Are we winning the game? They would have asked, what do we need to do in order to stay in the game? The author of this book shares a story of the US in the War of Vietnam. And in the War of Vietnam, over a period of 5 years, 7 years, I forget the length of time, the United States lost 250,000 lives. In that same period, Vietnam lost over 3 million lives. And the US got out of the war, they conceded, and they lost. Now, how could they lose when they were winning every battle and they were decimating the country of Vietnam? Because Vietnam would never give up. They were playing an infinite game. What the US didn't realize is the people of Vietnam had been fighting for independence for their entire lives. This was just a way of life for them. And they were committed to keep fighting until the last person was alive. In other words, they would never give up. And because they were playing an infinite game, the US was playing a finite game. US lost the war, just like Blockbuster did. BlackBerry. Do you know at one time, BlackBerry had 98% of market share. And within a couple of years, that market share was down to 2%. When the iPhone was first introduced to the market, BlackBerry laughed. That's silly. Nobody's going to buy that. 2 years later, they have 2% market share. They went from 98% to 2% because they were playing the wrong game. Kodak. Who remembers Kodak? At one point, they were one of the largest companies in America. They were super successful. They had the technology to go digital, and they chose not to. And who do you know that owns a Kodak camera? How about Microsoft versus Apple? Well, there's a really cool story in this book, and I just want to share part of this with you. When Microsoft launched the Zune, now the Zune was Microsoft's answer to the iPod. Who remembers iPods? Yeah, I had one. I remember those, right? And the Zune was Microsoft's answer to the iPod. Matter of fact, the Zune was superior. It was a better product. It looked better, it operated better, and by all practical means, it should have taken over the market share for the iPod, but it never did. When Microsoft launched the Zune, there was no grand vision that the product was helping to advance. The purpose of the Zune was to beat Apple. That was it. That was their vision. We're going to beat Apple. Okay. They didn't have a grand vision of how this was going to impact the world. They weren't thinking about what possibilities the future might hold. It was just a competition for market share and money, one in which Microsoft wasn't doing very well. Ballmer, who's the CEO of Microsoft at the time, predicted that Zune could beat the iPod. Couldn't have been more wrong. Debuting with a 9% market share, the Zune's popularity declined steadily until it hit 1% in 2010. The following year, it discontinued. The iPod, in contrast, enjoyed around 70% slice for the same period of time. Well, who knows what happened in 2010, 2009? The iPhone was introduced. And what Microsoft didn't know is Apple was playing an infinite game. They were thinking, what do we need to do to stay relevant in the market? They weren't thinking, we're on the top of the hill, we're king of the hill, we're number one, we've got all this market share, life is good, we're playing a finite game and life is good. No, they were thinking, if I was Microsoft, what would I do to put Apple out of business? By the way, that's a question all of you should ask yourself. If I was my competition, what would I do to put myself out of business? If I own a company, I'm asking, if I was a competitor, what would I do in order to put my company out of business? And then I would be strategic in how I built my company to make it such that nobody could put me out of business. Well, since Apple was thinking this way, they were in the background this entire time creating the iPhone, and they knew that the iPhone would make the iPod and Zune and all of these other MP3 players obsolete. They're going to go away. And it happened. Now, I shared with you earlier my just cause, and I shared with you how I see this regardless of I'm on this team, I'm on this team, I'm on neither team. My just cause is to be a difference maker, to matter, to change lives, inspire, motivate, and encourage you. And I can promise you, in the world of real estate, there are people who don't like the fact that I no longer play for one team. There are people who are unhappy that I'm not playing for another team. And honestly, none of that matters to me. Because my just cause is to be a difference maker, to matter, to change lives, inspire, motivate, and encourage you. And I can do that from anywhere. And I will continue to do that. Hey, if that wasn't my just cause, would there be people on this call that I've known for many, many years, that I've been in business with for many, many years? No, there wouldn't be. Because I promise you, when Tom Brady left the New England Patriots to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he wasn't meeting with the players of the New England Patriots every day and saying, okay, guys, let's do this in order to get better. No, he's playing a finite game. That's the way sports are organized. There's the only one way to play professional basketball, high school basketball, college basketball, professional football, high school football, college football, win the game. That's the only way to play the game, but it doesn't have to be that way in business. And all of us need to have a huge paradigm shift in how we look at business and go from being, how can we become number one, to how can we become irreplaceable to the community, that we can provide so much value to the people who choose to work with us that they would never want to work with anybody again. What can I do as a real estate agent to become so valuable that I'm never going to go out of business? In other words, quit focusing on the competition, focus on yourself and become the best you can become. And I promise you, at the end of life, you have left this place better than you found it. All right, what'd you learn? What are your thoughts? Raise your hand. Totally disagree.
Hey, John.
Raise your hand. It's okay. Jack.
Hey, you know what, John? Just let me say one thing. No matter what the haters are saying about not being on one team, man, you're so valuable. And I appreciate being able to start my morning, well, not start my morning, but on my way to taking my boy to school, being able to listen. And he sits in the back seat, listens to you too. So I appreciate that. But what a paradigm shift we can make. You know, one of my partners on the call, I sent him a text while I was dropping my son off and said, hey, are you on this call? Because the things you're talking about, comparing, you know, Blockbuster and Leading Edge and that sort of thing, you know, we are truly competing with ourselves. Mm-hmm. And the long game is where we should play. So man, I appreciate you so much. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Jack. Means a lot to me. All right, I'm going to read a few comments from the chat while the rest of you who are thinking, I want to talk, but I don't want to talk. Raise your hand and talk. Lance Randall, it's so good to see you on my call again. My friend, my brother, thank you for being here. That was great perspective. Thanks, John. I appreciate you. I appreciate you, Lance. And the Dolphins will make a comeback. I know they've lost a couple games here, and all of my Miami Dolphin friends are probably panicking right now because they're looking at the playoffs from the outside in, and they're going, oh my gosh, here we go again. It's not true. You guys have an amazing team. They will make a comeback. Clarissa, thank God for your perspective, your just cause. Thank you, Clarissa. I'm glad to be friends with you. 70 participants on this call. That's a new record. Thanks, Alan. I didn't even notice that. Megan, talk to me.
Good morning. You always bring in like everything that you say is always so relatable, and I just love it so much. And what resonated with me was, when you leave this world, are they going to say like you won it all, you won life? And that reminded me of when I was in labor with my son. So his heart rate dropped, and we were still going to try and do a natural delivery. And my significant other looked at me and he said, "You don't get a trophy for doing a natural delivery. Get the C-section." So why am I crying, John? Jesus, this is ridiculous. Okay, so that resonated with me because you don't get the trophy. Just do the right thing.
Okay. That's a drop the mic moment. Megan, your significant other couldn't have been more right. And I know who you are, and you and I are a lot alike, and you're fighting. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And you needed somebody who saw a blind spot. By the way, that's a coach who said, that's not the goal. The goal is to bring our child into the world healthy and for you to survive this delivery.
So true.
All right, that was powerful. Thank you for that. Let's see, Stephanie, Kodaks. Now you're showing your age. Yeah, I am. I remember going to Eckerd Drugs. There's another store that went out of business in St. Petersburg, Florida, and going in there with my roll of film. Remember that? And having pictures developed, right? Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. You know, our kids look at us. So Lacey looks at me like, what? You did what? So yeah, the world changes. It's our job to stay relevant. By the way, it's a choice. You either choose to stay relevant or you don't. Larissa, talk to me.
It's amazing, John. So, you know, Eckerd's, yes. I used to work at Eckerd's as a teenager. And the rolls of film.
Yeah.
Story, we would take so many pictures, and you know, it would get costly to get them developed. When I moved from my house about 18 years ago, I had a drawer full of film that I never developed. I still have those rolls in a bucket in my garage because in my mind, one day I'm going to develop them.
Is that even possible? I mean, are there companies that still do that? I don't know. Maybe there is.
No, I don't even know.
Oh, that's great. All right, everybody. Thank you for being on the call with me today. I appreciate you. I learn more from these calls than you do. I get more from these calls than you do. So I appreciate you showing up. If you didn't, I'd be just talking to a blank screen. So it's nice to know that there's other people who are going on this journey with me. Thank you. Welcome to the resistance. We're going to change the way the world thinks when it comes to how you do real estate. There is a better way to do it. We're going to find that way, and we're going to do it that way. Make it a great day, everybody.